to investigate the Bible, not only do we have this problem about not knowing who the authors are of most of it and not having original copies, we find that the Bible is contradictory to itself in places, contradictory to science in other places, and incorrect in its some of its historical findings.
And there's been a lot of changes, and look at the library that was, and the books that have been burned over the ages, the libraries in Alexander that went up in flames. There's been a lot of stuff lost. So secular history isn't always going to record everything, and so, but that doesn't mean that.
So you're saying what you're saying is that because there's a possibility that there might have been extra biblical evidence in the Library of Alexandria, that's enough, but you don't have any. You don't know that evidence even exists.
I'm not saying that that's going to satisfy everyone, but
why should it satisfy anybody? Well, I mean, you could say that there's extra biblical evidence buried under the Sahara that we just haven't found yet. That shouldn't be good enough for anybody.
Well, but everyone's personal experience and their whole when they read the Bible and they gather information from it as a historical record, and you look at these things. A lot of it happened. What happened there with Herod is, of course, symbolic of a whole thing that happened with Moses, the children killed. So they was trying to picture that. And
so it's metaphor and not history.
A record of it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean the first time that type happened in Egypt when those children were slaughtered, there may not be a secular record for that either.
Right, so it's metaphor and not history.
So, but we can't say for sure that story is not true because there's no other secular record. Sometimes there is a mesh where there's a secular record, and it all seems to work out.
But you want to be very, very careful about assuming that something is historically accurate when there isn't independent corroborating information, or even when there's just a few points that can be corroborated. Like the story of the Trojan War was believed to be, entirely mythological for a long time until they dug up the city of Troy. Well, just because the book describing the Trojan War references a city called Troy that we find out later actually existed, doesn't mean that therefore Zeus and Hera and Apollo and Ares are all real.
And that ties into something you said a minute ago, where you said you can't prove that those stories didn't happen. Well, you can't prove that the stories of other religions didn't happen, and yet.
Right.
So why would you call you're not a churchian, but you rely on the Bible and use that view of God. Why not the Quran? Why not any other scriptural text of any other religion?
Well, I've not studied the Quran in depth, but I've studied the Bible in depth.
So you're accepting the first one that you've studied?
Well, I'm looking at it at the main meat of everything, and whatever intersects with it, I'll be glad to look at, and that's where I come to look at the Quran. But that's only because of my study of the Bible that it led me there. But so I am concentrating on that because it's the only thing that I see in the whole world that seems to point to that, and where I can get my information about that, about God. And that's why I look to those things.
Okay, Stan, but we've been trying to find out what it is, what the criteria is that you're using to justify, taking that particular book of ancient stories that references some places that we know actually existed and has some corroborating evidence for some of its non-supernatural claims, and saying that one's true when there are all kinds of other books in the world that are the same, that make some verifiable claims about some non-supernatural things, and yet but we reject those. We reject the idea of the Greek gods. Why reject that and embrace Christianity and embrace the Bible? And the only justification you've given us is you picked the Bible first and you're going with it.
And now everything else will be
which is fine. If that's your criteria, fine. But would you mind saying that's what your criteria is?
Well, I'm not saying that there is a criteria for going out and picking your religion. I guess what I'm saying is my own personal way I grew up in this world and my experience and what brought me to the point of looking in the Bible in the first place is why I choose and believe in God and the God of the Bible. And, you know, that's because of just the way things worked out in the world for me.
Okay.
And so it's this personal experience.
So,
right.
Setting
and
aside,
you have your own personal experience, too, and why you don't believe in God. And that's why, because of your personal experiences along the way.
No,
yeah, but we're
no.
No.
Well, my lack of belief in God is not because of some esoteric experience. I was a Christian for 25 years, and my lack of belief is due to direct study and an investigation to find evidence to support and come up with any good reason to believe.
And here we are. You studied the same book I did, and I studied, but the different ways that we grew, I guess, in this world.
No, the difference is that I studied more than that book.
And on top of that, Stan, we do have standards of evidence, right? Rational, hard-nosed, skeptical standards of evidence that we use.
Your evidence is no more evidence than my evidence.
Oh, yes, it is.
I'm afraid so.
Well,
now you may reject our stand. If you reject,
you go by the argument that you can't prove something that.
Stan, hang on. Okay, hang on. Now, if you reject the skeptical, hard-nosed, rational standards of evidence that we apply when we decide what to believe and what not to believe, if you reject those standards, then it's no surprise at all to hear you saying that our evidence is the same as yours, right? I don't know what to do about that except, urge you to maybe, take the whole thing a little more seriously to where...
Sorry.
The dog's mad at us now.
No.
So if you took the whole thing more seriously, you would embrace a more serious standard instead of just picking up the Bible because you were raised and your life experiences led you to it. Okay, we're going to have to let you go, Stan.
Okay, thank you for your
Stan.
call.
Bye-bye. Good luck with your dog.
Bye-bye.
Oh, that was... Poor Stan.
It's on the one hand, it depends on what you're talking about. When he's saying that your evidence is the same as mine, no, actually it's not. And first of all, that's not the situation. When we're talking about just atheism, atheism is a lack of belief, and basically, the type of claim determines what type of evidence is sufficient to justify belief. And if I set my evidentiary bar about here, and Christianity only comes up to here, then I don't believe it.
Right.
And so I lack that belief.